All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to my first live stream of Rails Devs. I'm hosting this today to see how it works. It's my first time, like I said, to make sure the quality is okay, that you can hear me okay, and all that good stuff. So if you notice anything that looks weird with the stream, if it's low quality or you can't hear me or I'm all fuzzy or something, please let me know in the chat. I have it open in another monitor, so I should be able to reply verbally to all of that. So I see someone's already commenting hello. Really exciting. So I polled the Twitter audience a few days ago about what type of stuff they're most excited about to see on Rails Devs, and it looks like it's a pretty obvious, this location-based search, followed by experience level and then expertise tags. So location-based search is asking, it's right here, this tweet here is where I started talking about it, asking about developers for their city and state, potentially country, and then being able to automatically get the time zone from there and things like that. So the idea comes from a lot of businesses are asking specific time zone, specific locations, and that's something that I can match up on Rails devs. And also a lot of developers are saying, hey, I only want local jobs or I only want, things that are close to me time zone wise. So that's where this comes from. Let's close out of Twitter and pop up the app here. So the way that I'm thinking about it is that let's create a new account here, call it location, password. I'm running localhost here. I'll confirm my email and then log in. So I'm looking for work. This is the developer profile. We've already seen this primary time zone. I want a second one here that's essentially like an autocomplete for city-state. So obviously that won't work in very rural areas or outside of the US. They might not be called cities. They might be called different locales or something like that. But in a very similar sense, it's like I want something that says like, Portland, Oregon. And be able to normalize that, denormalize that, I forget which way it works, but turn that into a latitude, longitude so I can start to do actual location-based arithmetic and stuff like that on it. So the first step is, well, I guess let me write out a little bit of a to-do list here. So the first step is that we need the basic input, and this will be like a free-form location input that we'll need to save to the database. And then I just lower my gain a little bit. Sorry if that was a little bit too loud. Save to the database, and from there, we will then be able to display that on the profile. So that's like bare bones, doesn't have anything to do with locations. But if we start there, we'll be able to build on it quickly as we add more features. So from there, we could then decide if we want to reverse geocode that or geocode that. So that would be turning like Portland, Oregon into something like a latitude. This is wrong, but it's latitude, longitude. The other option would be to auto-complete the city-state match with an external library. And I've been poking around with a few things. I normally reach for Google Places, but I'd like to support something indie or support something that isn't Google. So if anyone has any ideas for that, let me know in the comments. But we'll get to that hopefully later in the stream. So if I haven't already answered it, but Jake asked in the chat why freeform instead of some kind of option select. I think autocomplete will get us there. An option select might be a little tough because there's like many thousands of cities in the world, and I don't want to have like a huge list of a dropdown. But we'll touch on that as things go and as we get there. So let's dive in. So I have a clean git status here. I've just checked out a branch that is right branched off of origin main. I have no commits on it. This is the branch that I'm working on. And then down here, I've just run the server with bin dev. So for those unfamiliar with Rails devs, bin dev will use the procfile.dev and kick it off with Overmind or Foreman, depending on which one you have installed. And the procfile.dev is kind of what the standard is now with new Rails 7 apps because of all the different background stuff going on, like JS bundling and CSS bundling. So we kick off our web instance, our worker, like a background job processor, our JavaScript assets, our CSS assets, and then I also added Stripe to, if you're working on anything to do with payments, will automatically forward all of those requests in, which is really nice. Yeah, there is a bit of delay in the stream. I think it's a few seconds, maybe 15. I'm not totally sure yet. Again, it's my first time, but the delay is just to make sure that the quality is acceptable because we're going to be looking at a lot of code, obviously. So without explaining anything else, let's start. So we have, let's start from the view. We have the developer form. And in the developer form, we have bio. I think the primary time zone is probably going to go away. I think that's going to be something that is going to be like hidden to the user and to the developer filling out the form. And that's just going to be inferred from the location. Because if I know where you live, or not where you live, if I know where you are based out of, I can get your time zone easily. And this is, I'll admit, if you're not based in the US, kind of a mess. Even if you're just based out of any of these ones up here, like there are just hundreds, and there are too many for us to easily scroll through. And you can't even do like a nice autocomplete. Like if you wanted to do Bogota, you couldn't even type in like BO because it's sorted by the GMT offset. And that's built, this is right from Rails directly. So I knew I was going to have to work on it eventually. No knocking to us when we built it out, but ready for something better. So we have the time zone select drop down. So I think that for now, we're just going to be really easy with it. And we're going to cut out the time zone. Yeah, you can see right there. That's how we get all the time zones, right? Oh, interesting. I think US zones actually puts them first, not only, because I remember just talking about Bogota. But this is where we want it. What we want, though, is just a input field. Let's go with hero. We'll copy name or hero. Those are exactly what we want. We want just a text field, right? So here is hero. We'll replace our two time zone ones, and we'll call this one location. Location, and field classes form location. This is just the classes, field classes is for error handling. Error helper? Form helper? Yeah, field classes checks if the object has any errors on that specific field, and if so, uses the error class, adds the error class. Not the error class, but gets the error classes from Yas. And Yas is a pretty cool gem that grabs it from the config. So these utility classes, and we'll say, hey, if you're an input of type text field, always use these CSS classes. If you don't have an error, add these. And if you do have an error, add these. And that's all worked through this because it's grabbing the type and pointing it to the status key. Pretty cool stuff. I'd recommend checking that out. I believe that it is... I will find it eventually. Links will be in the show notes, right? Classy YAML. There we go. From Tonks the Bear. Fairly new gem. Been maintaining it, helping just lead the direction for it. But there's some cool stuff and really nice when you're working with Tailwind. So recommend that. And okay, so we have a location, and then we have this profile hero help text. So let's do location help text. And if we write this, we're probably going to have an error because we don't have a translation. So we don't have any of this built out, right? So let's open up our locale file for English. And let's look for help text. developers form online presence profile. So what we'll do is we'll call this location help text. Oh, actually, it's supposed to be here. So location help text. Let's see. Your time zone offset. Nah, that's too business, too developer-y. We just want to tell someone why we're looking for a location. Providing your location helps match up with local businesses. And we'll come back and tweak that probably, but it's a good place to start. Okay, cool. There we go, we have location. And now what we're going to do is clean up this file because this is now out of order and I don't want to manually sort it. So we're going to do bundle exec I18 n tasks normalize, I believe is the, sweet. And was it already? It was already. Awesome. If it was down there and I ran it, yeah, it would actually alphabetize it for us. That's a pretty cool gem that gives us a lot of like health checks and all this stuff around I18N that is just like annoying. So we have our field built out, but if we try to type anything in there, add all the required forms, my desktop of all the images of me and baby Duke, and we try to save that, time zone can't be blank rate because we're still validating the time zone on the developer. And if you notice, this was dropped out. That is because if we scroll up in our server logs, we should have an unpermitted parameter somewhere around here. There we are, unpermitted parameter location. So let's fix that and hop into our developer controller. And down at the bottom, we have our developer params, where we're requiring the developer and permitting certain things. So instead of time zone, we're going to do location. And on the developer model, we are validating the time zone here. Presence true only on create. So if I look at the database schema, we don't have a null false flag like we do for updated at or created at. So from the database level, it can be null. This was added when time zone was added to only validate on create because I didn't want existing developers to become invalid just because I decided to add a new column. So if we just get rid of this, we'll actually get around the validation issue. Let's do that as temporary change because for now we actually really want to get a time zone from location, and I will be requiring location again on create. So let's do that and see where it takes us. Portland, Oregon. Okay, so Rails is like, what is this location? I don't know what you're talking about, right? Because we don't have that column on the database. So let's add that column. We'll generate a migration, add location to developers. While that runs, I'm going to check the chat and see. Morning, everyone. It's nice to see you. Any questions or ideas, pop them in the chat and I'll answer them verbally. And so we created that migration. Let's open it with, down on the bottom left. If you're not familiar with Vim, running emigration is a command that comes from the Vim Rails, I believe, plugin. So what we'll do is add column. We'll add it to developers. It'll be called location, and it'll be of type string. I don't think it needs to be text. Text is much longer. String, this should only be a few characters. I don't think it's going to break 100 really ever, but I'm sure it'll bite me eventually. But for now, we'll do that, and we'll do null false. We won't do null false because otherwise that would invalidate, or actually it wouldn't even run because we have so many developers that don't have a location. Run this migration, and I am going to kick off with Spring, so things will just run a little bit faster. I know that Spring has kind of fallen out of favor these days, but I still really like it. And next time we run something like Spring, it's just so quick to get it running. So let's save that or refresh. New developer. Here's my hero, my bio, Portland, Oregon. And if we do this photo this time, great. So there's the letter opener popping up, which is sending the admin email to me. So we have a developer that is new, and if we pop open the database, or sorry, the console, I've aliased S to Spring there. Developer.last, we see that we have a location. Awesome. So before we move on, I'm going to add or at least just revisit our tests to make sure that we haven't broken anything or if we need to add something in there. So I'm going to run all of our tests outside of our JavaScript-powered integration tests. Those just take a little bit longer to run. I don't think that anything should fail, but that's actually not really a good sign because we did modify some stuff. So let's see what we get. Okay, a ton of failures because of this right here. Location can't be blank. So we're creating a bunch of developers either in our seeds or in our actual tests, and those don't have a location set, right? So let's figure that out. So where did we first fail? I think I want to look at the developer integration test, assuming that we have failures there. Open up a new tab here. And I'm going to copy this with capital C. You'll see copied down here in the bottom left. Another shortcut that's in my Vim config. And then I can do srails test, and then just paste that there. Failure right off the bat. Perfect. Cool. Developer count didn't change on line 80 and 91. So let's go to 80. So we are posting, successful profile creation. We sign in the user without any developer profile or business profile. We're asserting that it creates a developer and an analytics event, one of each. And we're posting with these valid developer params. And these valid developer params are actually no longer valid because we have a time zone here instead of a location. So let's change those and rerun these tests. Beautiful. Those are passing now. Let's just scroll back up, and we have a model on developer test. Let's look at that. A model dev test. We'll look down at the bottom and see if we have. Okay, so we'll copy this again. See why we're failing here. Validation failed, location can't be blank. Location can't be blank. So we're looking at tests on line 39, 84, and 154. So 39. Okay, so we're saying that developer attributes is where we're passing in this stuff. Where is developer attributes defined? Open up a new window. I'm down the bottom left again, RG ag successor for defining the developer attributes in the code base. Okay, cool. Right, we have a helper, developer's helper that we import right here on the top left. And here, what a surprise, right? Time zone Pacific. So in location, we'll do city, state, the old state of ST. Run those again. This actually might fix the rest of the test suite because this is a shared concern right here. So like we're including it here and we're using it in a couple different places. We're using it developers helper. Yeah, 2 places there, or 3 places. All right, we're green. Awesome. Take a look at the chat. Connor wants to know, Connor, what color scheme this is. I'm working with, oh, don't look at that. Kind of look at the window over here. So I am working with the, oh, actually, I don't have it in here anymore. Take it back. So I'm using a pretty cool plugin. Let's get distracted for a second here. But if I open up my appearance, if I change this to dark, you'll notice that it changes my Vim color scheme and also my iTrim color scheme, which is really nice because I set this to auto, and throughout the day it changes from light to dark depending on if the sun is up or down. But the way that I have that working is in our, one sec. I have a plugin called Auto Dark, which, based on the OS appearance change, changes it to different color schemes. So it's base 16.1 dark and base 16.1 light. I love that they have a notice those. Those are intentional. That's how they spell the themes. But yeah, it's base 16.1 dark, and that's the, I think, Chris Kempson, base 16 stuff. So if you look up his stuff, that was close. Chris Kempson. He has a bunch of different color schemes. It's like a generator that creates all of the different color schemes for different IDEs and different text editors and all that stuff. So I'm using the iTerm one and the Vim one from here. Okay, back on track here. So let's get rid of that. We have our location. Oh yeah, we want to display that somewhere here. So let's sign out and sign in with my, let's just hide that off the screen, my real account here. Just grab my password from, okay, so let's look at my profile. I have location down here, right? Or time zone. That feels like a really good spot to just either add this on top of or replace it. So for now, let's just add it on top of this time zone thing. So if we go to the developer page, I'm on developer show, we have a couple, it's not that bad, but we have a partial down here called details. And that's being rendered twice. We hide it on large and we then hide it on small. And that's because when we do this, it moves up to the top. There's probably a better way to do that now that I'm just showing why it's there. But this isn't super intensive in terms of rendering, so I'm not terribly concerned. But as always, PR is welcome. So let's open up details. And we'll see right at the bottom, all view components, beautiful. We have the time zone component. And the time zone component pretty straightforward. It essentially is just saying if the time zone is present, render it. I like this approach because it compartmentalizes everything, and it also gives us one less if statement throughout the app. If we didn't do, oh, let me take a step back. These are application components. No, they're not. They are view components from GitHub. They're not built into Rails, but they should be maybe. They offer a really nice way of separating view logic from partials because they are testable in isolation. I don't have a test for this because it's just one bit of logic here. But if you look at something like a paywall component, paywall components are this right here. We hide that, and we hide your real name if it's not your profile or if you don't have a business account. So if you're just like a free user poking around the site, if I open railsdevs.com in private browsing and I click on the most recent developer, you'll see this is private and this is private. That is because that is hidden unless you're a paying business customer, or it is, again, your account. So the way that works is we check if we should render the content. We have logic, and you'll notice that we have all these tests that are super, super tightly coupled in a good way to our, coupled is the wrong word. They're very like compact, and they only test a very small surface area. They render it, they run some CSS assertions, and that's kind of it. It's really nice because then we can use them and start building them, like Russian doll style, of wrapping a paywall component. Inside of that is a renderable component. Inside of those are each of those developer links. And each of these have a render question mark, right? So we start to build out our view hierarchy without having to deal with nested divs. We just have nested view components. So that means that this question mark here, def render, is part of the component library, and it says, if this returns true, render it. If not, don't render it at all. It saves us a nice like if statement. Instead, this would be something like, if developer.timezone.present, then we would render something like this. And that might not look much better to you, but if we then wanted to test that logic, we'd have to make sure that we have a test for this entire partial. Instead, now we can just test this one little thing here. So what I'd like to do is straight up copy this time zone component, and we'll call it a location component. And here's a new one. We have a location component. We have a location, initialize with the location. And instead of using the clock outline, we're going to use some sort of globe question mark. We'll come back to that. And coming over here to the right, we have the time component view, like the actual HTML. We're going to menu copy that as well into a location component. And instead here, rendering the time zone, we're going to render the location. So let's render it. Location component, we'll render it above developer.location. So just from that, we should be able to refresh this page and see no difference. I don't have a time zone, or sorry, location on this profile here, so we don't see anything, which is perfect. Let's add my location. Profile is updated. Ah, beautiful. What's going on here is that we don't have that globe question mark. So what we're seeing is just like a, let's see if we can, yeah, an empty SVG that says, SVG not found. What did you mean by this? It's part of the inline SVG tag gem, which works really nice with all this stuff. Just checking in with the chat really quick. Yeah, I'll write up, not necessarily show notes, but like viewer notes at the end of this and link to all of the different gems and stuff that I talked about. Also, I don't know where my YouTube window is. All I can see is the chat. If anyone knows how many people are here and want to pop that in the chat, I'd appreciate it because I don't know. Thank you. Okay, moving on. We have a location component. We have a time zone component. So we wanted to talk about this globe, right? Let's go to my favorite place for icons, hero icons. And I'm pretty sure there already is a globe. Cool. So it looks like I was using the outline version because we wanted it to be a little bit bigger. I think the globe one makes the most sense versus globe alt. So I'll copy the SVG and edit, well, we can do it this way. We use the mouse for a second. App, assets, images, icons, outline. And we'll add, whoops, so MA to add a node, globe.svg. And we'll pop it right in there. And we'll just get rid of those question marks, write that file. And there we are. Beautiful. Got a little globe. So if you notice, I didn't refresh my screen or this page. That is coming from a gem called Hotwire Live Reload. You just add that to your development file, and I think you add environment dev. You add a couple directories that you want the gem to watch, and it will set up a action cable hook. Not webhook. I always forget the name of these things. WebSocket. That anytime all of this stuff is changes, it will reload the page for you, which is really cool. It requires a little tag in your, this is my application layout, Hotwire Live Reload tags. Excuse me. That it actually wires up all of the JavaScript and stuff that you need there. But definitely recommend that one. I'll link to it as well. But if you are impatient, Google Hotwire Live Reload. Yeah, from Krill. I featured this in my newsletter, I think twice now, actually, because someone brought it up again. But it just hit version 1 pretty recently, so it's pretty stable. It works really well. The only thing that I complain about it is that if your error page pops up, you won't get live reload anymore, but it's fine. 11 people. It's exciting. Welcome, everyone. My first stream, and got 11 people here. Just catch up again. Do you have some interest in doing... Yeah, I think that auto time zone is definitely going to be built in as we use some sort of API to auto complete the location, because once we know your location, we can reverse geocode it. Sorry, we can geocode it to turn into a latitude, longitude, and then we can figure out where in that time zone thing it lines up. I used to use Google Places autocomplete, and that provides all of that right in the API response. So maybe I'll go to that, but I have some other stuff that I'm going to experiment with first. Okay, so we have this here. We have a weird line in the middle. I don't, not sure why that's happening, but I believe that that has something. Let me close out some of these because we are rendering them side by side, and we have all of this just wrapped in this divide y, right? So they're sitting next to each other with divide y, and then CS or tailwind. That will mean put a line between them across the y-axis, divide the y-axis in gray 200. So what we can do is throw one of these renderable components around it. Renderable component essentially says, did anything render inside of it? It is a custom one, not a, is there any content? That's all it does. Is if there's content, render it, otherwise don't. So it builds up that Russian doll of, if this doesn't render and this doesn't render at all. But if one of them renders, then this one will render. And the reason behind that is that we want to throw in that tag there, that CSS class, to give them a nice bit of spacing, which isn't working. So we're going to have to dive into that and figure out what's going on. Okay, so let's make sure that this is saved. We'll manually refresh this in case something's not going on there. And we will, I'm just going to kill the server, clear it out, and run it again, and just make sure we're not getting any errors or anything. Don't see anything. So, what is going on? Let's dive in. It looks like we also have two lines instead of one there. Not really sure where that's coming from either. So we have a space. We have this, which is space Y, PT, padding top 4. And then these both have borders. So for some reason that makes a lot of sense. That's why there's two borders here. Portland is throwing a border top, and this is throwing a border top. Neither of them should be doing it. That should be handled by the encompassing layout. So let's pop open the location component, HTML, and there it is, border top. Let's delete all the way to the P. And we'll do the same thing with the time zone HTML. And we'll just press dot to delete to the P is there as well. Write all those, and so we have too much spacing now. So padding top 6 is definitely too much. We already have space Y here. I think we actually don't need this wrapper anymore on either of them. We'll save that. And now we're getting there. And if you notice, all these other ones have space Y and a top padding. So let's borrow that. That looks pretty good to me. We have our location, we have our time zone for someone who doesn't have one or the other. So if I go and edit, I'm going to do it from the console actually. So that is me. So we'll just assign that to D. We'll say D location equals nil, D time zone. Save that. And we'll see that they both disappear and that line disappears. But if we do just location, we get the one line, and yeah. So that renderable component is very little bit of code and really helpful. And I'm just going to copy my time zone from before. All right, so back to our text edit. Basic info, freeform location input done. Save to database done. Display that in the profile. Done outside of any sort of test. So let's see if we broke anything first. Didn't break anything. but do we want to add a test for this? It seems like we didn't have a test for viewing the location, which I'm okay with. But let's look at integration, developer test. This is more about access, invalid profile creation, successful edits. And we're not really nested for attributes. That's a good solid test. How we redirect them. There's a lot of good value in these tests. I don't know how much value there is in making sure that the location gets passed through. We already are testing that the location gets passed through and doesn't raise any exceptions. I just don't know if there's a lot of value in like making sure that location is set on the developer. Probably there is, but I think that for right now, I'm going to skip it and say that this part of the code is probably pretty good. So get st is my shortcut for status. That comes from my global git config. So I have a couple of these built out, so I can do get st for status, get co for checkout, commit, br for branch. My favorites lol and lola. Open up another one over here. Get lol just does like this single line thing of just the commit SHA and the message all in the order. And get lola also shows you anything that's off of the branch that you're on. So really helpful for seeing like all the ins and outs of merges and stuff. I use that less now that I do squash merging, but still really helpful. And I saw this and thought I was exposing something. We're good. Auto squash 2 is really nice when you're rebasing. You just don't have to worry about doing squashing. Okay. So git status. We have a couple of new files here. We have the location component. We have the new migration. We have the test modifications. We updated our schema and we added some locale. So before I do this, I'm going to run the whole CI suite, which has been checked. Takes about 30 seconds, which will make sure we don't have any tests that are failing. And I'm going to check in on the chat here. Jesper wants to know, how do you remove the indentation for the full div block without selecting it all? Was it just a save formatter running it? I'm not sure if I think you're, what was that? The location HTML. Are you saying like the select like this versus select like that? I'm not sure if I understand the question, but oh, I got you. So you're talking about this kind of stuff. Indentation, maybe? If you do Shift V to do a visual selection, and then you can select all like multiple lines at once. When you're there, you can do Shift left and right angle brace, which will indent or unindent. But also, I have an automatic code former set up that's bound to comma equals, which will just format the entire file for me. So I don't have to worry about indentation at all. That may have been what you saw. Where are we here? My stars. I have all this in this Vim config, not including the colors though. It forked off of Build Groundwork, which is forked off of Pivotal Labs, which is where I used to work. So I'm very familiar with it. Lots of really good stuff in here, including ALE, asynchronous linting, fuzzy finder, JSplit, nerd tree is like the little window on the left. Don't want to bore a lot of people with Vim here, but I definitely recommend checking this out. And it's one of my, if you go to my stars, it's in my stack. Oh, along with base 16 Xcode. So did our test suite, it passed, beautiful. 61 assertions, how long did it take? 6 seconds? That's not bad. Done. So 9:40, I have about 20 minutes left. I don't know how far I'm going to get with geocoding it, but we can give it a shot. So we have a couple of different options for geocoding, right? We can take a like random string which is going to be, keep using Portland, Oregon, and try to send that to a geocoding API. And hopefully they'll get us back a latitude, longitude. That's kind of like a shot in the dark. But it might be easier to implement to start because we don't have to do any real JavaScript. We can do it on the back end. We can do it asynchronously even. The downside is that if someone enters, garbage in Utah, which hopefully isn't a city, but they might not get anything back because that city doesn't exist. Or if someone enters something where they're just like, oh, I live in Portland. And the geocoder's like, cool, you live in Portland, Maine. And they're like, no, that's wrong. So I think for our first pass, this is actually okay. And we can do it, I believe, without having to integrate any third-party APIs by just downloading a big flat file of the different locations. So let's give it a shot. Let's commit our code first. So first thing I normally do is I know we're committing all of this, but I will still do it in parts. So the first thing I'll do is add any new file, any untracked file. That took all of these untracked files and staged them as files. You'll see new file. Now we can actually add everything by patches or chunks, whatever you want to call it. So I hit enter, and now I get these line Academy options here, which is just saying to you, stage this chunk, do not stage it, quit, etc., etc. I love staging by chunks because it's really helpful in showing exactly the code that you wrote. So here's my workflow. I know I want to keep this. It was the SVG. I'll do yes. Why? Location component HTML. Looks good to me. Location component. I'm looking at this now and I'm realizing we might want a renderable icon component that we could extract from location and time zone because they both do the same thing, except they have a different icon. Well, there's not a lot of logic here, so it's not like terrible that we reproduce it, but if I get a third one, I'll think about doing that. Here's the change that we made to the time zone component. We've changed the permitted attributes from time zone to location. So here, I don't want to commit that comment, right? So I'm going to do E for edit, which opens up the chunk in Vim. So here, if you notice down here, I can remove the dashes. This is a subtraction, these are additions. To remove a subtraction, make them spaces. And to remove additions, delete them. So instead of this being an addition, I'm just going to delete that line. Now our diff becomes remove this line, add that line, which is exactly what we want. So we will write and quit that. Go back into terminal. Here's the change to details. We want that. Here's our change to the form. All looks good to me. Our copy, which we might come back and reassess, but for now it's good enough. Our migration, our schema change, and now a whole bunch of crap that I can't figure out how to get rid of because if for some reason my database drops precision on every single one of these. If you know, I'd love to hear about how to fix this. I spent too much time on it and I'm kind of ignoring it for this stream, so I apologize. So I'm just going to do no to not stage that change. I'm going to keep clicking no until I get to our location. There we are. I'm going to do yes because I want to stage this. And then we're going to do D, which essentially says ignore the rest of the file. So if I pop open question mark, you'll see that D says do not stage this hunk or any of the later hunks in this file. It's exactly what we want. Our test, we change time zone to location. Yes, same thing here. Okay, so now you'll notice that we have a bunch of stuff staged and a bunch of stuff that's not staged. If I do a diff, this is all the stuff that we haven't staged. So there's that comment. Here's all the precision stuff. It looks great, so let's commit this. Oops. My Vim terminal keeps opening on the other side. So there's going to be the freeform location input and display. And now I'm going to check out by chunks this. I'm going to check that out, and I'm going to check A for the rest of this file out. And now we have a clean git status. We'll push this up to a branch, and we're good. Checking on the... All right. So 15 minutes left. Let's see how we can do some geocoding. So there is a gem, I believe called just Geocoder. Yeah, there we are. That takes in a search term and gives you results. Pretty straightforward. It works from a couple different things. It can do it. Yeah, they have lookup configurations, right? So I can say use Yandex or use Google or use blah, blah, blah. But one of them, I believe, is like straight up a local download that I can just get. It's like a big flat file. Huh. Let's just try this locally, right? So let's open up our gem file. Geocoder gem. That's what version we have. 173. And just to be, we'll sort that. Bundle. Okay, console, and let's see if that worked. Okay, so I think it's just geocode. Search. Search Portland, Oregon. Okay, so it looked like that hit the, how do you pronounce that? Database? Nominatum database. It seemed like it was an external request. It's from OpenStreetMap. That's nice. So I believe that's all fairly open source-ish. But we got back two results. So let's just save these results so we can mess around with them without hitting the internet again. Two. This is it's just an array. That's nice. The first one has an ID, a latitude and longitude. That's exactly what we want. A display name, and then an address. So this is nice. City, Portland, state, Oregon, country. That's kind of exactly what we're looking for here. And then what about the second one? Hotel Vance. I don't know why that. I guess because it has Portland in the name. And probably in Oregon. Okay, so that's pretty good. I mean, I'd love to not return this. Like, I'd love to be able to return just type locations or something. So let's see if we can really quickly look at that. We're using this nomatum. Open? API guide. It's weird that it doesn't say what the default is. But let's see if we have default. Open. Wow, I just must have typed it wrong. 1 request per second. That should actually be okay for us. In terms of service, I'll have to review this. Please limit it to 1 per second. Include your contact information in the user headers. Oh, that's cool. So I have to configure it first, my email address or something. I must provide attribution. And it's OpenStreetMap. I can get behind that. Let's see if our... Okay. So let's get started with that. We'll open up this in a new... Come on. There we go. So what I want to do is to automatically geocode your objects. Your model must provide a method that returns an address. So that's going to be our location. Your model must have a way to store latitude, longitude. Okay, so we want to add 2 attribute columns of type float or decimal, latitude and longitude. So we're going to add coordinates to developer. didn't run that with Spring, so it's taking a second. Add column, developers, latitude. Let's do doubles on a thing. It says float or decimal. Decimal. And then longitude. Rails, migrate. And then your model, tell your geocoder where to find the object address. Cool. Oh, this is perfect. So geocoded by address. So we'll open the developer. Put location. And then after validation, geocode. Okay. So developer.first should be me. Can I just save? There we go. Update developers. Set latitude, longitude, location, latitude, longitude. If I do it again, it is definitely hitting that API again. You can see that tiny delay there where it stutters just a tiny bit. So we'll probably want to set up caching in some way, because if I ended up saving every single developer, we wouldn't want it to update. But I really wish that it only changed if location changed. If it only updated if location changed. I guess I can do that myself. This is nothing fancy, it's just a method, right? So after validation, geocode if saved changes to location. I always forget the terminal. Saved, use it somewhere else. Saved change. I added this recently. Can anyone help me? Saved changes to attribute. What is it called? Saved change to attribute. Saved change to location. Okay. So we will reload our console and try to. Okay, so it's still. Oh no! Now it's not doing it because it's only updating the updated at. It's not updating the geocode method. This is not exactly what we're going to do here is define geocode. We're going to do my geocode and just call geocode, but we're going to set a binding. So we'll see exactly when it gets called. Reload again. Not hitting it there, not hitting it there. So d equals developer.first, d.location equals, let's just try Portland, and then d.save. Wow, that didn't get called at all. That's weird. Okay, I must have mistyped something there, but that seems to be what we want. Okay, if save changed after validation. After validation, if we want to ensure that someone has a latitude, longitude, we actually want to do this before validation because we want to add the validation of latitude on create, like if, location. That's not how that works, but something like that. So let's leave that for now. Cool. Keep that. So just to wrap, I'm just gonna reset the server. Just to wrap this up, because there's only 5 minutes left. Yeah, location changes, and I don't think that's a real thing. um, but it's like the saved change or whatever. Anyway, let's just display this really quickly on the screen, and then we will wrap up. So dev show, no details, and we will just say right here, developer.latitude. There we are. So we have our coordinates. We reverse geocoded 45 and negative 122. If we change this to Paris, that should have changed, but we're not seeing it. So we clearly aren't hitting that correctly, the developer. So what we're going to do is just get rid of that, edit, and save again. Okay, 48 and 2, which is, I think, east of the meridian. So that wraps up what I want to talk about today, or what I want to work on today. Next up for me will be figuring out if I really want to use this just geocoding API. Probably not in the long term, but it might be a good just middle ground as I start to gather information. Ideally, we're working with an autocomplete library. That was going to be a lot of JavaScript, so I didn't want to. I'm glad we didn't touch on that yet. I wanted to focus more on the Rails and Ruby aspect of all this. Anyway, I hope that that was helpful, entertaining. At the least, I hope you learned something. I will document some of the different tools that I used, my configuration for some stuff in the notes of this, and I'll publish this. This should be published to YouTube soon. If you want to watch the replay, or if you had to duck out early. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. And if you have any feedback, I'd love to hear about it. My Twitter handle, here, let's do this. I'm Joe Mazzalotti on Twitter, and I blog on mazzalotti.com. I also have a Hotwire newsletter that goes out once a month. That's coming out next week or 2 weeks. That talks about all the latest in like Hotwire dev and Turbo Space and all that good stuff. So give me a follow there. Tweet at me. My DMs are open if you have any more ideas on what you'd like to see next, or if you like this, or in the comments. Thanks.